It's Wednesday, the 6th of January. Parliament is debating giving the Prime Minister power to extend lockdown until perhaps the end of March. It was pretty clear to me the other night when he said the kids will be off until half term, but it could be a few weeks after that they go back. It was obvious to me it was going into March. It looks like he wants the powers for it to go on to the end of March. That of itself would be depressing enough if it wasn't for Chris Whitty, that ever cheerful figure that we see at those press conferences telling us we might have to lock down next winter because of flu. But they're in charge. However, there's a way out of this, isn't there? And the way out is vaccinations. But ask yourself, are the people currently running this country on top of their game? Well, have a think about schools. So all the schools are closed. Oh, no, they're not, because a whole load of schools had to open today because there are some students aged 17 and 18 that aren't doing A-levels, they're doing BTEC. So the schools have had to open today for the BTEC pupils to go in, and they've got exams later on this week. And then, of course, the Prime Minister said that nursery schools and early years learning centres, they would all stay open. And yet, despite the fact we're going to vaccinate nurses, we're going to vaccinate people working in care homes as a priority, as indeed we should, no provision to vaccinate those working in nurseries or early years learning. You get the feeling, I get the feeling, they're making it up as they go along. They don't really know what they're doing, which brings me to the big question. Do you think these people are the right people to roll out the vaccine programme? Now, there is hope, of course. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, it's cheap. It only costs £3 a go. There's another one coming on stream very quickly from Johnson & Johnson, which again is going to be pretty cheap. All of these much cheaper than the Pfizer vaccine, not needing to be delivered or kept at a temperature very close to use of minus 70 degrees centigrade, and no more difficult to administer than the annual winter flu jab. Now, the government tell us, Boris Johnson tells us, with good luck and a following wind, by the middle of February, we may have vaccinated up to 10 million people. And it's estimated there are up to 13 million people in those primary categories that we feel need to get the vaccine first. Michael Gove, being interviewed yesterday, said that he hoped we might get up to 2 million vaccinations a week by the end of January, but he wouldn't, absolutely wouldn't, say he guaranteed we would reach that target. So the only way out of this disaster, and yeah, I mean, I really think it is actually a disaster. We're locked down, the weather's awful, although I did get to go tobogganing this morning, which I did enjoy a bit. But the weather's horrible. We face the prospects of months of this. We can't play golf. We can't go fishing. We can't go to the pub. I mean, there isn't much we can do. So the way out of this is vaccination. Now, a few days ago, I shocked many of you, particularly those who've been my supporters for years, by saying that I thought perhaps Tony Blair had a role. All right, you can switch off if you want to, but please listen to the argument. In a national crisis, you get a government of all the talents. I agree with you. What Blair did over the Iraq War was completely and utterly wrong. Some would say even criminal. What Blair did, opening up the borders uncontrollably, that has led to a 6 million increase in the population of this country since 2001, was wrong and has damaged the quality of life of very many people. His fanaticism with the European Union was crazy. Although, I am pleased with one thing. He is the only person that he's ever, he shouted at me in public in the European Parliament.
Your only real achievement is that Britain is now isolated, alienated. We are completely alone within the European Union.
You are isolated.
Which is why, it's been said before, hang on a second, everybody else gets an extra minute, Mr. President. I'm asking for 10 seconds. Thank you. Which is why, Prime Minister, I urge you, it's often been said that you wanted to be the permanent President of Europe. Please stay on for a further 6 months, 6 more months of the British presidency, and they'll kick us out. Thank you.
In my experience in politics, there are 3 groups of people. There's first of all the reactionaries. Let me just tell you, sir, and your colleagues, you sit with our country's flag, you do not represent our country's interests.
I was very pleased with that. But whatever you think of Blair's misdeeds, when he says he's going to do something, he actually goes and does it. And the reason that I picked up on Blair was I saw him last week talking about the vaccine, talking about the rollout, with more knowledge than anybody in government. It was he that started the argument saying, rather than vaccinating people twice, 3 weeks apart, wouldn't it make more sense to vaccinate double the number of people and perhaps taking some of the bureaucracy out, maybe even more than double the number of people, so that they've got a high level of immunity, even if it's not the highest that could be achieved? And that argument that we should give 1 dose to as many people as we possibly can in short order, that argument that Blair put forward last week has worked because the government have changed tack. Well, today, Blair was on Good Morning Britain with Piers and Susanna, and once again showed that he understands how vaccinations work. He makes the point, all the primary schools are closed. Why not open them up as vaccination centres? He makes the point, on polling day, we get 30 million people going through those centres.
I would actually have mobile facilities as well, going round place by place. You could use polling stations. I mean, remember, we managed on election day to get, 30 million people
well, we had this conversation
through
yesterday.
the doors voting.
So why can't we have a big, rapid vaccination programme? He makes the point that there are thousands of people out there who would be well qualified to do this, whose services are not being asked for.
You've got occupational health workers, several thousand of those. They're perfectly qualified to give what is essentially a flu jab.
Oh, and by the way, those retired doctors and nurses who are applying to help are having to fill in 21 different forms, including ones on terrorism, whether they've had anti-terrorism lessons, and of course, as ever, gender awareness, which we must all be so aware of these days. So there is a massive bureaucracy that is holding the whole thing up. Blair is for extending it much further than that. Blair even postulated that maybe the army could be brought in. Blair said we could and we should reach 3 million vaccinations every week by the end of this month and 5 million vaccinations every week by the time March comes along. This Conservative Party are very bad at using any outside talent. When Trump was elected just over 4 years ago, I was the first foreign politician to have a meeting with him. You would have thought, wouldn't you, given that I had a personal relationship with him, with Bannon, with many of the team, you would have thought I might have played some useful role for the government with the Trump administration, because they, at the time, had an ambassador who, frankly, couldn't get through the front door. But no, they didn't want anything to do with me, because it was all about the Tory party. And I think, again, in this crisis, they haven't brought in anyone from outside because it's all about the Tory party. Well, it needs to be about the country. And I'm going to repeat the argument I made the other day. Some of you will scream at me, but if Blair is so confident that he thinks he can get this job done, he thinks he can get us up to 5 million vaccinations a week, then frankly, if that gets us out of the mess that we're in, why not use his services? If not him, well, call in Nick Carter, General Nick Carter, our senior military figure in the country. I just don't believe these drongos we've got in cabinet are up to the job. They failed totally in the early days of testing. Test and trace, they've spent nearly £25 billion on, and it doesn't work. They overpromise and underdeliver constantly. It's time we got some people actually running this that not only were professional, but had a track record of getting things done. Unless we have max vaccinations, unless we have them very, very quickly, it won't just be a long, dark winter. It'll go on into the spring and the summer. So I repeat the call. We want a government of all the talents. Just quickly on other things, you may have seen overnight that there were the arrests of 53 people in Hong Kong, 53 people who stand up for democracy. And the Chinese Communist Party now have got an iron grip on that territory. And this in the very week when the European Union decided, oh, let's go forward and have an investment deal with China. So the European Union, through their own greed, are aiding and abetting a Chinese Communist Party, rapacious Chinese Communist Party, who intend to use 2021, which they emerge into in a far stronger position than all the rest of us. They intend to use 2021 to spread their power as much as they can around the world. And we've got to wake up to what China's intentions are. Just look at what they're doing to Hong Kong. That should tell you enough. Thank you.